What's in a question? Maybe just about everything important. A smart and sharp question should strike up a more engaging conversation. So let's have ourselves a little discussion. Diane joins us in the studio. It's a loaded one indeed.
Right.
The legal boundaries of abortion in South Korea. It's murky waters, which is why Diane is here to help us better understand. Good morning.
Hopefully. Good morning.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I've got to say it's a heavy one. It's a one that is divisive in nature, and that's even without bringing in a religious angle, which we're going to kind of sidestep for the sake of the conversation. Let's give our question of the day once more to all of our listeners.
Right. I don't expect anyone to give me an answer to this question, but so question, is abortion legal in South Korea? Now I thought this was a timely topic for us to discuss because the U.S. is getting overheated with the recent Supreme Court's overturn of its ruling of what's called Roe versus Wade.
So the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the Roe v. Wade ruling, which was largely a constitutional right, I suppose, and a protection for those who seeked abortion. But let's remind our listeners, in case they don't have an American upbringing or have been following this story, because Roe v. Wade is a landmark case that dates back to the 1970s.
Yes, so it goes way back to 1973. Roe versus Wade was a huge decision of the U.S. Supreme Court in which the court ruled that the Constitution of the U.S. conferred the right to choose to have an abortion. The decision struck down many federal and state abortion laws and fueled an ongoing abortion debate in the U.S. about whether or to what extent abortion should be legal, who should decide the legality of abortion, and what the role of moral and religious views in the political sphere should be.
It's a tough one, isn't it?
Right. So the recent court ruling is a historic and far-reaching decision that declared the constitutional right to abortion, upheld for nearly half century, no longer exists.
Okay, so that conversation is still continuing. And at state levels, they have to answer to their own set of regulations, which is how the United States operates. Now, let's turn our heads to South Korea, because even this is rather complicated. Technically, is abortion legal in South Korea?
So it's a simple and incredibly important question, but the answer is still very unclear. Korea's decades-old ban on abortion was ruled unconstitutional for the first time in April 2019. Yet the answer to whether abortion is legal remains a difficult one because there's still no new law that says it's permitted. So it's unconstitutional to ban abortion, but there's no law saying it's illegal. It's legal. It's a bit tricky.
It's absolutely tricky.
Right.
From what I understand, there's 6 different pending bills trying to legalize abortion in South Korea, but it's complicated. Actually, one of the bills I suggested actually wants to downright ban it together, too.
Right.
So the tug-of-war continues. Yet, it was deemed unconstitutional to ban abortion in South Korea back in 2019.
Yes.
So let's go back to April 2019. Why was that a historic moment for South Korea?
So this April 11, 2019 ruling by Korea's Constitutional Court is sort of the opposite of what has happened in the U.S. in the past month. Korea went the other way, ordering the National Assembly to revise the criminal act that makes it illegal for women to get an abortion unless it's for medical reasons or the pregnancy resulted from rape or incest.
However, no new laws have been introduced since that court ruling in 2019.
Yeah, so that's what makes it so tricky for both the doctors and the patients. The Constitutional Court ruling required the National Assembly to revise the Criminal Act by December 31st, 2020.
It's 2 years later.
Right. However, the legislature has failed to pass the new bill, making it very difficult for medical practitioners to attempt to interpret the unclear legal position. Because no revision had been made by the end of 2020, the abortion ban did technically lose its legal effect starting January 1st, 2021. But with no new laws introduced clarifying the situations, doctors just don't know where they stand, and so does the moms.
So, see, that puts both, like you said, the expecting mothers and the doctors in a tricky situation. Should they or should they not seek and practice abortion? So right now, the constitutional ruling is sort of put in the back burner without a concrete answer as to what medical professionals can do.
Exactly. So what was considered one of the most monumental and progressive constitutional rulings in Korean history has quickly lost its shine as the confusion on both sides of the hospital door builds with each day that the National Assembly fails to establish new regulations on abortion. 7 bills have been put forward by 6 different teams of representatives and 1 by the government, but none have been made past the parliamentary subcommittee stage.
Okay.
While pro-choice activists and civic groups push for the swift adoption of legislation protecting women's rights and health, pro-life religious organizations and conservative doctors say that laws must be set after scrutinizing all factors and in the strictest way possible to protect the fetus.
I believe another religious community in South Korea, the Korean bishop and the diocese came forward with their own statement saying the U.S. is headed in the right direction. So you can see an entire religious angle. There is the right to, decide for what's right for a woman's body. So see, the tug of war is remarkably similar no matter where you are in the world, how the government responds, what kind of regulations are brought forward. Now that's confusing. I was actually really surprised to find that abortion is allowed across Europe as well as state-controlled China and Vietnam. I thought that was unique because I would expect China to be otherwise. So then what's the legal status right now in South Korea?
So although some parts of the existing anti-abortion laws were lost due to inconsistency with the constitution, Korea is not a country where abortion is completely permitted. As the Constitutional Court recognized the necessity of protecting the life of the fetus, punishment for abortion may still be imposed depending on the specific circumstances. But technically speaking, lawyers say abortions are a little bit legal in Korea today because the one law that made them illegal has been ruled unconstitutional. But although this is legally sound interpretation, in practice, without a law that specifically says abortion is legal, and as the relevant legal system has not been established, it's believed that whether or not abortion will be subject to criminal punishment may vary depending on the specific case. So it's just a big chunk of gray area right now in South Korea. And nobody can actually tell and say that, you can absolutely do it or you can not do it.
If the legal boundaries are not clear, at least on paper, it seems, then where do you leave the medical clinics? Will they take the risk for the mothers who want to seek abortion, right? And I mean, even prior to this ruling in 2019 in South Korea, in the case of rape and incest, abortion was legal, right? That has always been the case, but it needs to be clearly stipulated so people are not afraid to seek the help that they need, right? Now, I'm sure the lack of a new law causes many day-to-day problems in the field.
So without a law, a lot of doctors are not confident that they are permitted to perform the procedure, of course. Worse still, patients can face a huge financial burden on top of the psychological burden because they cannot be covered by medical insurance.
That's an important point, huh?
Right. Oh Jung-won, a gynecologist at Suncheonhyang University, Seoul, says, because hospital can't give a straightforward answer, patients cannot access the information they need, especially the socially vulnerable, like the minors. And they instead end up asking around on the internet or people they know, rather than the medical experts they should be consulting. They even end up going for illegal drugs on the internet, which can be potentially more dangerous to their health.
And how easily accessible those illegal drugs are on the internet will shock you. So it keeps, I think, the minors and the vulnerable much too exposed to dangers of these drugs that seems to promise to terminate your pregnancy. You mentioned that there were several attempts at setting these new bills, none to avail, but what were they?
So the goal is to set standards for abortion bans that respect both the right to life of the fetus and the right woman to choose, right? The most widely known bill, which was put forward by the government in 2021, suggests that all abortions should be fully allowed until 14 weeks and partially allowed afterward if the mother suffers from social or economic difficulties. The strictest recommendation comes from the Conservative People Power Party, which says that abortions should only be permitted between 6 to 10 weeks and should be illegal afterward.
Completely illegal
afterward. The most progressive bill put forward by the Justice Party pushes for any and all pregnancies to be terminated upon the mother's wish.
So the range is really big. But none of them is being pushed forward in Parliament as we speak. However, going back to that Roe v. Wade ruling. That makes it only harder for the bill to be agreed upon and passed in South Korea, too.
Right. More politicians agree on the need for swift legislation, but the huge gulf between their positions have prevented any real progress.
Sure.
The U.S. Supreme Court ruling has further muddied the waters. That's because the Roe v. Wade ruling that U.S. Supreme Court struck down on June 24th was used as part of the Korean Constitutional Court's argument in its 2019 ruling.
Okay.
So that Supreme Court has now overturned that precedent, gives the pro-life lobby in Korea some strong argument, right?
Because that was the entire basis for the Constitutional
exactly.
Court's
And they
ruling.
went back, so it gives them the reason to say that, we should go back also, right? However, activists argue that South Korea's National Assembly should look to the global scale, not just the U.S., right? And put women's health at the utmost priority when passing the bill.
I think that's important.
Right.
We can't just single out the United States, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, the U.S. may have taken a step back. South Korea is in this huge gray area. Is there any other country that allows abortion? I again mentioned China and Vietnam as kind of being an unlikely one.
Right. There's Canada. No law strict abortion in Canada, where it's covered by provincial and territorial public healthcare systems as an essential medical procedure within 20 weeks of conception. And under some circumstances after that point, such as when a pregnancy threatens a mother's life. Access and exceptions vary by province and sometimes by the hospital.
Right.
Also, abortions have been legal in England, Scotland, and Wales for more than 50 years, protected by the Abortion Act of 1967.
1967.
Right, it goes way back. So abortion can be legally performed up to 24th week of pregnancy and must be medically approved by at least 2 doctors.
Okay, so there are varying, I guess, examples in different parts of the world.
Right.
Which one is the best fit for South Korea? Now, that's for politicians to duke out. What I'm urgently asking for is a timely decision, because during all this time it stalls. Again, it puts, I think, both doctors and patients in really difficult situations.
Exactly.
But thank you so much for summarizing where South Korea stands when it comes to abortion. That was absolutely complicated.
Yes, it was.
But thanks for doing the tough work. We'll see you tomorrow, Diane.
I'll see you tomorrow.
We do have our Environmental Fix Tuesdays for tomorrow with 2 coming up next.